What if I told you that one of the most pivotal battles of World War II, a battle that could have completely changed the course of history, was almost forgotten by most? The Battle of Kharkov in 1942 was not just another brutal clash between armies. It was a turning point that could have tipped the balance of power in favor of the Axis. But as history unfolded, the repercussions of this battle would echo far beyond the city of Kharkov, influencing the outcome of the war itself. Are you ready to hear how a single battle almost decided the fate of World War II? Because the story of Kharkov is one of missed opportunities, daring reversals, and an outcome that could have rewritten history. Kharkov, a major industrial city in Ukraine, was the site of one of the most intense and crucial battles of World War II. Situated in the Soviet Union's industrial heartland, Kharkov was of immense strategic value, both for the Nazis, who needed to secure it to solidify their Eastern Front, and for the Soviets, who were desperate to hold it to prevent further Nazi advances into their territory. The battle wasn't just about capturing or defending a city, it was about gaining momentum, about shifting the balance of power on the Eastern Front. In 1942, the Germans seemed to be on the verge of achieving their ultimate goal, crushing the Soviet resistance and securing their place in the East. But Kharkov was where that dream almost came undone. To understand the significance of the Battle of Kharkov, we need to step back and look at the larger picture. By 1942, the Germans had already made significant gains on the Eastern Front, with their brutal Operation Barbarossa having already pushed deep into Soviet territory. Cities like Kiev and Smolensk had fallen. The Soviet Union seemed on the brink of collapse. But despite these victories, the Germans were stretched thin, and the Soviets were not as defeated as the Nazis had hoped. Soviet forces were regrouping, mobilizing, and preparing for counterattacks. The winter of 1941 to 1942 had been especially harsh, slowing the Germans down and giving the Soviets a chance to recover. The Germans were facing a new challenge: the Soviet will to fight back. By the spring of 1942, the Germans were eager to press forward with their plans, and Kharkov was one of the next targets on the list. Kharkov's industrial resources, especially its factories that produced tanks and aircraft, made it a crucial objective for the Germans. Capturing it would not only be a symbolic victory but would also disrupt Soviet production and allow the Germans to continue their march eastward. The Battle of Kharkov officially began in May 1942, when the Germans launched a full-scale assault. The city was fiercely defended by Soviet troops, who had already suffered devastating losses in previous months, but were determined not to let the Nazis claim another important stronghold. Kharkov had to be defended at all costs. At first, the Germans seemed unstoppable. They used their well-coordinated pincer movements, overwhelming Soviet defenses and driving deep into the city. Soviet forces were forced to retreat, and by May 15, 1942, Kharkov had fallen into German hands. But here's where the story gets interesting. Despite this apparent victory for the Germans, something was happening behind the scenes that would almost turn the tide of the war. The Soviet command was already preparing a counteroffensive. The fall of Kharkov was not the end for the Soviets. It was just the beginning of an even bolder plan. As the Germans celebrated their success in Kharkov, Soviet commanders, led by General Georgy Zhukov, were already thinking several moves ahead. They knew that if they could launch a successful counteroffensive, they could not only reclaim Kharkov, but also destroy a significant portion of the German forces that had become overextended. In early June 1942, just weeks after the Germans had captured Kharkov, the Soviets launched a brilliant counterattack. They had been secretly positioning their forces around the city, creating a trap that would soon spring into action. Zhukov's strategy was simple: lure the Germans deeper into the city and then encircle them with overwhelming Soviet forces from the rear. And that's exactly what happened. The Germans, overconfident in their victory and stretched thin, were caught off guard. Soviet forces, armed with fresh reinforcements, quickly encircled the German Sixth Army. The once unstoppable German offensive began to falter, as the Soviets cut off supply lines, forcing the Germans into a chaotic retreat. In a matter of days, the situation had completely reversed. The Soviet forces had nearly trapped the entire German Sixth Army in Kharkov, threatening to deal a devastating blow to the German war effort. Had the Soviets been able to close the encirclement and destroy the German forces, it would have been a massive victory. So the next time you think about the major turning points of World War II, remember Kharkov. It was a reminder that history is often shaped by moments of near victory and missed opportunities. And in the case of the Battle of Kharkov, both sides came so close to changing the outcome of the war, but only one would ultimately claim victory in the long run.